You think you know what happened on June 6, 1944. The history books told you a story about an impenetrable Atlantic wall that was supposed to keep the Allies out of Europe forever. They told you about thousands of paratroopers who dropped behind enemy lines with surgical precision, creating chaos in the German ranks. And they told you about Omaha Beach, where American soldiers stormed the sand in a coordinated assault, overwhelming German defenses in a display of military might. But almost everything you've been taught about D-Day is wrong, or at least incomplete. The real story is far messier, far more chaotic, and far more dependent on luck than anyone wants to admit. If you're interested in actual military history, not the Hollywood version, you should definitely subscribe to this channel. We dig into the myths that textbooks refuse to question. Let's start with the Atlantic Wall, that legendary German fortification that was supposed to be invincible. For years, military strategists and historians have portrayed it as some kind of impenetrable barrier, stretching across the entire European coast. The Germans certainly wanted everyone to believe that. Adolf Hitler himself ordered its construction, and propaganda ministers made sure the world knew about this supposedly unbeatable defense system. But when Allied planners actually studied the Atlantic Wall up close, using aerial reconnaissance and intelligence from French resistance fighters, they discovered something shocking. Most of it didn't exist. The Atlantic Wall was less a wall and more a scattered collection of bunkers, pillboxes, and anti-tank obstacles that had huge gaps between them. In many places along the Normandy coast, German fortifications were literally hundreds of yards apart. A soldier could walk between defensive positions without ever being under fire from both sides simultaneously. The Germans simply didn't have enough resources, enough manpower, or enough concrete to build the fortress they claimed to have built. They had constructed some formidable positions, yes, but they were isolated, disconnected, and in many cases, poorly manned. There's another crucial detail that the mythology overlooks entirely. The German commander in charge of coastal defenses, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, was deeply skeptical about the strength of these fortifications. He understood that a determined enemy with air superiority could break through almost any static defensive line. Rommel wanted to position mobile reserves inland so that German forces could counterattack any invasion quickly, crushing it before it gained a foothold. But his superiors disagreed. Higher command insisted on keeping mobile forces further back, which meant that when the invasion actually happened, German troops couldn't respond fast enough. The myth of the invincible Atlantic Wall crumbled in the face of reality. And that reality was organizational chaos on the German side. Now let's talk about Omaha Beach. And this is where the mythology becomes almost comical in its disconnect from what actually happened. You've probably seen the opening scene from a certain famous war film, where American soldiers charge through a hail of bullets, obstacles, and explosions. That scene is essentially accurate, but it's also incredibly misleading, because it presents Omaha Beach as a heroic moment, where soldiers overcame impossible odds through courage and determination. What it doesn't show is how disorganized, confused, and chaotic that moment truly was. The American assault on Omaha Beach was supposed to proceed according to a detailed plan. Soldiers would land in waves, secure specific objectives, and advance inland in a coordinated fashion. Instead, what happened was pure chaos. The landing craft missed their intended positions because navigation was difficult, and the currents were stronger than expected. Soldiers from different units landed scattered across miles of beach instead of in their assigned zones. Officers couldn't find their men. Men couldn't find their officers. Communication broke down almost immediately. Instead of the synchronized assault that planners envisioned, what actually occurred was something closer to organized desperation. Hundreds of American soldiers died not from heroic charges against the Germans, but from drowning in the shallow water after their landing craft sank, or being crushed under the weight of their own equipment as they tried to wade ashore. Others were shot down before they ever made it to the beach. The carnage was so severe that at one point, senior American officers were genuinely concerned that the entire landing might fail, The beachmaster, the officer in charge of coordinating traffic on the beach, was actually killed in the fighting. Omaha Beach succeeded not because of superior planning or tactical brilliance, but because enough American soldiers kept moving forward despite having absolutely no clear picture of what was happening around them. Like this video if you're starting to see how different the real D-Day was from what you've been told. History becomes infinitely more interesting when we acknowledge the actual messiness of events instead of imposing narrative order on them. The paratroopers are another part of the D-Day mythology that deserves serious scrutiny. According to popular accounts, thousands of paratroopers dropped behind German lines with remarkable accuracy, landing where they were supposed to land and executing their missions as planned. The reality was dramatically different. On the night before the invasion, thousands of paratroopers climbed into transport planes, filled with anticipation and fear. Some units had trained for months. They knew their objectives. They were ready, or at least they thought they were ready. What actually happened to many of these paratroopers was something between a nightmare and a black comedy. The pilots of the transport planes, many of whom had little experience flying at night or in formations, got lost. Some planes released their paratroopers miles away from the intended drop zones. Some released them at the wrong altitude. Some dropped their paratroopers directly over German positions. Soldiers who were supposed to land in specific fields ended up in trees, in marshes, and in villages that weren't even on their maps. Many paratroopers drowned in flooded fields because the Germans had deliberately flooded the low-lying areas around the coast. One American paratrooper unit that was supposed to secure a crucial bridge landed so far from their objective that they spent hours trying to figure out where they actually were. Another unit was scattered so badly that the surviving members had to improvise an entirely new mission because they couldn't possibly reach their original objective. Some paratroopers wandered around in the darkness, trying to find other members of their unit, only to stumble into German positions. The casualty rates among the airborne units were devastating, and much of that was due to the confusion created by inaccurate drops, not from enemy combat. But here's where the mythology gets even more problematic. Despite all this chaos and confusion, the paratroopers actually accomplished something important, and historians have spent decades trying to figure out why. They succeeded not because they executed their plan perfectly, but because the Germans were even more confused and disorganized than the Americans were. German command structures were in chaos. Orders weren't getting through. German units didn't know where the paratroopers were landing or in what numbers. The fog of war, as military theorists call it, worked in the Allies' favor. There's also a crucial element of luck involved in the paratrooper drops that the mythology completely ignores. Many of the paratroopers who landed in apparently useless locations ended up being exactly where they needed to be to harass German reinforcements and disrupt German command and control. A unit that was supposed to land at point A, but instead landed at point B, ended up blocking a critical German counterattack route. Another unit that was scattered across an entire valley ended up controlling key terrain simply by accident. The paratroopers deserved credit for their courage and adaptability, but the myth that they executed a precisely planned operation is simply false. When we look at D-Day honestly, we see an invasion that succeeded despite almost everything going wrong. German defenses that were supposed to be invincible turned out to be scattered and weak. An American beach assault that was supposed to be coordinated turned into a desperate scramble where soldiers had to improvise their way to victory. Paratroopers who were supposed to land in perfect formation scattered across the landscape and had to make up their mission as they went along. The real lesson of D-Day isn't about the triumph of superior planning or the inevitability of Allied victory. The real lesson is about resilience, improvisation, and the ability of soldiers to keep moving forward when everything goes wrong. It's about organizations that remained flexible enough to adapt when their detailed plans fell apart. It's about lower-ranking officers and enlisted men who had to make critical decisions without guidance from above because communication was impossible. This is what makes the actual D-Day story so much more interesting than the mythology. Real people in real situations, faced with impossible circumstances, somehow found ways to succeed. Not because they followed a perfect plan, but because they refused to give up when the plan disintegrated around them. If you've learned something from this bonus look at D-Day history, please like the video, And consider subscribing for more deep dives into historical events that challenge what you think you know. I'd genuinely love to know what aspect of the D-Day mythology surprised you the most, or if you have your own favorite overlooked detail about the invasion. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.